Hello and welcome to this very important conversation we're about to have that is a cornerstone to the Midlife Metabolism Reset Way. And that is really understanding and being empowered about the truth of carbohydrates and your metabolism. So as we get started, I just want to let you know what we're going to be covering in this lesson. We're going to cover how carbohydrates influence fat storage. We're going to cover how many carbohydrates are right for you. We're going to cover what are the best carbohydrates to eat, when are the best times to eat them, and the benefits of a shortened eating window. So all of these will be covered by the end of this lesson. There are more topics on top of this around carbohydrates, but this will give you a real solid, self-aware, self-empowerment way to critically think about how you make your decisions around carbohydrates. And quite honestly, what carbohydrates are, because I find that many individuals are confused about what is and is not a carbohydrate. So I also want to let you know that if you are carbohydrate savvy, you may have heard of the concept of the ketogenic lifestyle. Now, although I have in my lifestyle included bouts of moving in and out of ketosis, is what it's called, for various reasons, it's not part of every woman's goal. And so I want to let you know that as we're talking about carbohydrates, if you have a history of thinking about low carb eating or the ketogenic lifestyle, we're going to put that on the shelf just for a moment and just go back to basics so that you can start making some decisions from a place of being self-directed around the use of carbohydrates. So this is a testimonial from a client of mine that I worked with recently. She said, I tried to go keto, but in the back of my mind, I knew that I needed to eat more fruits and vegetables to feel healthy, right? So with the ketogenic lifestyle, you're even restricting many of your vegetables and fruits. And for this particular client, she had on one hand a goal of living a ketogenic lifestyle, but on the other hand, she was already stepping into it with reasons why it wasn't a good fit for her. So if you've ever stepped into walking towards a goal, but being of two minds, then it's much harder to be able to actually maintain and continue towards the outcome that you're looking for because you're already split in your mindset. So we worked together to really identify that she was of two minds, really identify what her true kind of self-directed goal was. And she went on to say, I can now see I was of two minds before I even started. I needed clarity before commitment. So that's what I'm going to be working with you today, is really around giving you an understanding so that you can develop some clarity and make some critical decisions around what you want your individualized midlife metabolism reset way to look like. So first of all, what is a carbohydrate? Let's just start off at the basics. There are so many things that are carbohydrates: fruits and juices, candy, soda, and cakes. Those are kind of the commonly understood. Any sort of processed food is high in carbohydrates. And when I say high in carbohydrates, you can replace carbohydrates with the word sugar. Okay, so carbohydrates and sugar, just for the basics of our conversation, are really incredibly interchangeable. Okay, so fruit and juices, very high in sugar. Candy, sodas, and cakes, not surprising, very high in sugar. Breads and pasta, very high in sugar, carbohydrates. Grains of all sorts, grains, beans, nuts, seeds, are also in the carbohydrate category, as well as our vegetables are of various levels of carbohydrate within them, right? You might kind of intuitively know that a sweet potato may have more sugar in it than, say, a bunch of kale, right? One is just sweeter than the other, but we're going to take a peek at what that all means and how that really affects your metabolism, okay? So there's lots of things that are included in that carbohydrate spectrum of food, okay? Now, when you eat a carbohydrate, it does not matter if that carbohydrate is a bowl of pasta, if it is a juice, a fruit juice, if it is a Snickers bar. Your body takes carbohydrates and it breaks them down into a form that is digestible called glucose, okay? Once that glucose enters into your body, it enters into your bloodstream. Your body does not want glucose floating around, free floating in your bloodstream more than just like a teaspoon at a time. And many times we consume more carbohydrates than would allow for that amount of glucose in your bloodstream. The emergency response that is created to get that glucose out of your bloodstream is the release of a hormone called insulin, okay? And yes, insulin is a hormone. We typically think about it as a drug in relationship to diabetes, helping individuals with type 1 and or type 2 diabetes to regulate their glucose levels, right? But our pancreas actually produces insulin on its own when our body is in balance to be able to come to the rescue and to take that glucose out of the bloodstream. Now, what does it do with that glucose? Well, what it does is it packs it up and it knocks on the door of different cells, because that's where insulin wants to pack away glucose inside cells. Now, just generic cells is the place that it goes first, right? It knocks on the doors of the cells and it says, hey cells, do you need some glucose for energy today? And the cells may say, yes, I do, but I only need this amount. Okay, insulin says, all right, I'm going to give you what you need. I'm going to go on to the next station, which is the muscles. It then knocks on the door of the muscles and it says, hey, muscles, would you like some glucose? And the muscles might say, yeah, I just did a HIIT training. I need to pack in some more energy. I would love some glucose. And then it says, but I don't need all that glucose. That's too much. So insulin says, okay, gives muscles the glucose that it needs, then it packs itself up and it moves on to the liver. It says, hey, liver, do you have any room for storage of glucose today? And the liver might say, actually, I am already filled. I don't need any more glucose today. I have a limited storage capacity for glucose. Why don't you go on to the next stop? And that next stop actually has an unlimited storage capacity. That next stop is our fat cells. And you may or may not have noticed, but our fat cells have a lot of storage room, all right? And so that is the process. When we eat carbohydrates, insulin is called upon to take that glucose out of the bloodstream, and it goes through this process. And so you may imagine that it's a good idea to be able to eat in a mindful way to make it so that insulin is able to store glucose in our cells more regularly, our muscles more regularly. It's good to kind of like not even make it to the liver as often. But if we can eat in a mindful way, and I'll talk to you about what that means, to be able to not even get down to the fat stores, then that's a lot of what we are looking to avoid in this lifestyle, right? Our bodies are actually created that way for survival. It's a good thing because we're actually designed for food insecurity. We're not designed to have food access the way that we do as a modern human. So it's great that our body's designed that way for the traditional way that humans would live. Not great now that we have food access 24/7. And as we hit midlife, something kind of funky, lots of things that are funky happen. But one of the things that happens is we very typically become more insulin resistant, okay? We develop insulin resistance. And that means as our estrogen dips, that process that insulin would go through, the doors to receive the glucose, they're just more resistant to opening those doors. So as insulin goes to the cells like, I don't really know if I want as much today as I wanted in the past. Move on to the next place. Muscles say, I'm not really quite sure. I don't really need as much energy. And so as it goes along the station, I don't know if you've noticed, but midlife in my body means that typically there's a higher tendency to packing on some additional fat cells, especially in areas of my hips and around my belly and my organs. And that fat that we store around our organs is called visceral fat. It's not a healthy form of fat. We want to avoid that as much as possible. And so although it's always an important thing to eat mindful of glucose storage and this insulin deposit train, even more so as we shift into midlife. So we're going to talk about how to eat mindfully around glucose and insulin in 3 ways. We're going to talk about the amount of carbohydrates we eat, how often we eat them, and the type of carbohydrates that we eat. So first of all, the amount. This is called a carbohydrate curve. And what you're looking at is basically kind of a mathematical way to look at carbohydrates in order to make good decisions. Now, I will let you know that I like to discourage people from stepping into the midlife metabolism reset way with kind of like a hyper focus of tracking anything, whether it's tracking calories, carbohydrates. I really like to encourage people to start listening to their body and be able to eat intuitively, listening to the cues that their body are giving them. But I do want to give you a basic understanding of what eating certain number of carbohydrates typically do to the body. So I'm going to start at the bottom of the right-hand side of this image. It says 300 plus grams a day. This is a wildly excessive insulin production and typically leads to disease and pathology. Now, the typical number 1 diseases we talk about are type 2 diabetes. People are typically just born with type 1, so it's really type 2 that we're talking about. That would be more dietarily created, but also just it leads to all diseases of metabolic dysfunction, which include all the big chronic illnesses, okay? So when we're eating that excessive amount, it always leads to bad things. 300 grams, carbohydrates are measured in grams per day. 150 to 300 per day, this is a default zone for typical grain-based diets. It's also a place in which we are typically gaining what we'll call insidious weight gain. Like it's inevitable that people are going to be gaining weight. And so when we say, oh, it's inevitable that when we are shifting into midlife, we are gaining weight. Well, it's only inevitable if we're not mindful of how many carbohydrates we are consuming, okay? 100 to 150, lifelong health, effortless weight management. Okay, so that's that weight management zone. So if you're already in a weight zone that you are thrilled with, by all means, 100 to 150 grams a day, you can certainly do that. It's actually, once you learn how to eat in a way that is healthy and vibrantly filled with foods and really mindfully aware of balancing your carbohydrates, it's actually kind of hard to eat that many once you've transitioned your lifestyle. 50 to 100 grams a day, you typically lose 1 to 2 pounds of fat per week. Now, when we talk about weight loss, folks, there's lots of ways to lose weight. There's inflammation that you can lose really quickly. There's water that you can lose really quickly. You also gain those really quickly back. But fat is kind of like the sweet spot of what we're looking to lose. And typically, if you're between 50 to 100 grams of carbohydrates, you lose 1 to 2 pounds of fat per week and enjoy a satisfying, what we're calling primal-based meals. Primal is really kind of like a whole food way of eating with a low carbohydrate load on your body. And then there is the ever famously talked about now zone of ketosis, which is 0 to 50 grams of carbohydrates a day, rapid fat loss. Also, the use of intermittent fasting, and it's having your liver create ketones. So many times people making ketones, those are called exogenous ketones, unnecessary. Your body knows how to create ketones, and there are reasons why you may want to at some point explore this lifestyle. But for right now, we're taking step one, okay? So you can look at this chart on the left-hand side. It then shows everything visually again. The 50 level is ketosis, the 100 to 50 is weight loss. It's kind of a nice sweet spot for very simple, enjoyable eating patterns. 100 to 150 effortless weight maintenance, and then 150 to 300 is what we call the insidious weight gain zone. It's typically around 5 pounds a year. And then the danger zone is 300 plus. So I hope this gives you a little bit of an indication on what those numbers might be, what your zone might want, what zone you might want to be aware of. And I encourage you to do a carbohydrate audit. There's different ways we can do that. A carbohydrate audit that starts with really understanding what this can look like. Okay, so I want to give you a visual. 20 grams of carbs. Okay, you can do this in two ways. You could have a huge plate full of vegetables, which vegetables are carbohydrates, huge plate of vegetables, or one slice of half a roll, right? So that's what I want you to do, is just as you're thinking about a carbohydrate audit, what you're really doing is you're developing self-awareness around how beneficial, if you want to spend your carbohydrate points, I hate the word points, but I'm going to use them right now, on foods. It's always a good way to spend your points on vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, ideally green leafy vegetables. There's so many reasons why it's so good to have these in your diet in abundance, both from phytonutrient standpoint, antioxidant standpoint. They're just so beneficial. Or that tiny little piece of bread. When you start thinking about it this way and looking at it this way, it becomes kind of clear, like, oh, that's not a lot that I'm getting with that one little piece of bread. So it starts to shift the mindset, and the Midlife Metabolism Reset Way is all about shifting awareness, shifting mindset for long-term lifestyle design goals. Okay, so again, just wanted to highlight, if you were going to be spending your 20 points on anything because you knew you wanted to stay within 50 to 100, because you were looking to lose 1 to 2 pounds of fat per week, then that 20 points with that one little piece of bread, you're not really getting a lot. Now, how you can start doing this audits, I want to teach you how to look at nutritional facts. Now, some foods, the best foods, don't come with barcodes. They don't come with nutritional facts, right? They're just foods. And so you can look those up right on the internet. There's lots of good cheat sheets on carbohydrate amounts that are included in your nuts and grains and vegetables and fruits that don't come with a barcode like this. But I do want you to also be able to take a peek at the food labels of the foods you have in your pantry already, and really do this audit from the perspective of, oh gosh, if I want to be within 50 to 100 carbs a day, is a tasty treat, but is it really worth it, right? In future videos, we're going to talk about looking at those foods that are in your pantry with a barcode a little even more, with a finer eye, because there's so many processed foods out there right now that are right on the label, low carb, even keto, that are still not healthy for us, right? It's just really good marketing, because they're saying, hey, you know, it's a smart idea to eat low carb. You want to be keto, maybe. I'm going to make it really easy for you in big bold letters on the front of this tasty looking cookie package. I'm going to tell you you're making a good choice. So we'll look at that in future videos. But for right now, I just want you to look at this, okay? Nutrition facts, start at the top. It says serving size for this product is 3 pieces. servings per container, 3. This is important to know mathematically, okay? Because when we go down, so there's 3 in this container. So if I were to eat a third of this package, I would be getting this amount of carbohydrates. If I eat the whole package, I would be eating 3 times this amount on the package, okay? So if we scroll down to total carbohydrates, it says 30 grams of carbohydrates. So when you're eating a third of this package, you're getting 30 grams of carbohydrates. When you eat this whole package, because it's just so gosh darn tasty, you're having 90 grams. So just with that one binge treat, you are having already close to 100 grams of carbohydrates, okay? And we know what happens once the carbohydrate levels increase. We are depositing the glucose into our fat stores. Now, total carbohydrates is 30 grams. Now, maybe this is a food that has some dietary fiber. When dietary fiber is involved, there's different ways to think about this. Some people say you can subtract the dietary fiber from the total carbohydrates. Some people say don't do that. I'm going to let you know that the jury is out, and I want you to listen to your body. So if you are eating something that and you are not feeling like your body is going into weight loss, then if you have a treat that has high dietary fiber, high carbohydrates, and you're subtracting the dietary fiber from the carbohydrates, you're like, but I'm still gaining weight. Maybe we take a little peek at that food that is theoretically not very high in carbohydrates, but your body still may be responding to it in a way that is not in alignment with your goals, okay? Because so total carbohydrates for these 3 pieces of whatever this is, 30 grams. Dietary fiber is part of the total carbohydrates, but fiber does not digest, so you can subtract the grams of fiber from the total carbohydrate grams. So this would be 27 grams of carbohydrates. And then there's another line that says sugars. Those are already included in the total count of carbohydrates. So this particular label would be a 27-gram carbohydrate food if you eat a third of the package. I hope this is helpful for you. I encourage you to just go through your pantry, do a little audit, and make some decisions around what you want to keep and what you don't want to keep. So that's really about the amount. We're going to talk about how often, because how often is really important. Remember, glucose comes in and it says, hey, cells, do you need some glucose, cells? And the cells say, yeah, I need some glucose. And it puts it in until it's full. Then it goes to muscles, then it goes to liver, and then it goes to the fat cells. So the reality is, if the cells are already full and the muscles are already full and the liver is already full, the remaining location for it to go to is in the fat cells, okay? So a key to this is making sure that you're eating in a way that gives the cells and the muscles enough time to consume their glucose that they already have inside them before introducing more to them, okay? So when we talk about how often, we're going to talk about movement, because movement helps the cells and the muscles gobble up some of their glucose more quickly. And we're going to talk about eating window, okay? So if you are eating snacks constantly throughout the day, the cells, the muscles, they are saying no to insulin more often than not, saying, no, I already had enough. Keep on moving down the road. But if you are eating less often, it's more in alignment with glucose storage. Okay, so we're going to talk about movement, eating windows. So let's imagine that you wake up in the morning and you wake up and you have not eaten for 14 hours. It's not actually that hard. Okay, I actually didn't do the math before I came to this video, and I'm horrible at math, but let's imagine that you stopped eating at 6 p.m. Okay, and you stopped eating at 6 p.m. because you typically go to bed at 9 p.m. And it's a really good idea to stop eating 3 hours before you go to bed for your midlife metabolism reset, okay? So you stopped eating at 6 p.m., 12 hours later, 6 a.m., then 8 a.m., you are now at the 14-hour mark. So it's really not that challenging. And kind of sometimes people are 14 hours, how do I do that? You just sleep through it. So you woke up and you have not eaten for 14 hours. Well, you know what? Your cells have room for glucose by this time. Right now, if you've eaten a snack at 10:30 at night and you are getting up and you're eating something at 7 o'clock in the morning, it is a good rule of thumb between 12 and 16 hours is a sweet spot to give your body a rest at night so that you have room for the new energy storage in the morning when you are breaking your fast. You're going to hear me talk a lot about breaking your fast versus breakfast, because typically people think of breakfast as a thing that you do in the morning, like first thing when you wake up, because you need it, right? We don't. When your metabolism is reset, you're typically not hungry first thing in the morning. That's just normal. And as human beings, we never had a 3-meal a day existence until the industrial age. So we're not designed for that, okay? So no surprise that our bodies are responding the way that they are to something that we're not designed for. So anyways, back to the topic, 14-hour fast, cells are ready to receive glucose. Now it's a good idea to still not have a high carbohydrate breakfast. It's a good idea to be able to, and we'll talk about this in future videos, have a high protein, high fat breakfast, not a high carbohydrate breakfast, because it's a good idea to give your body even a little more rest. Now, then you have your lunch and you decide to move your body, even a 10, 15-minute walk around the block. That allows your muscles to gobble up some of the glucose that they have in storage so that the new glucose can be packed away inside the muscles. So you're being mindful of the muscles needing to use up their storage supplies so they can put your food into it. And then again, you stop eating 3 hours before bed to be able to support your digestive system, support your sleep, actually. Sleep is highly, highly beneficial for the midlife metabolism reset way. And this is just a really gentle way to be able to integrate in mindfulness around insulin and glucose storage. Now we're going to talk about types of carbohydrates. There's simple carbs and there's complex carbs. You may have heard that term before, but what is a simple carb? What is a complex carb? Simple carbs produce a spike in blood glucose, like a really fast spike. It's like you eat it and it goes boink, right? Lots of glucose unpacked really easily, providing the body with a short, lasting source of energy. Typical foods include foods like sugar, breads, pasta, cookies, fruits, and juices, soda and wine, as well as dairy. So these are simple carbs. Now, I'm not saying never eat these carbs. We're going to talk about that later on in the program, but I am saying just be aware that there is a spike that is going to be happening. And being aware of, do I think I have room inside my cells? Do I think I have room inside my muscles? No, I haven't been sedentary all day long. I don't have room inside my muscles. Well, if I'm going to this evening go have a glass of wine, maybe I want to do a little movement beforehand, okay? So just really thinking about that. Then complex carbs. Complex carbohydrates take longer to digest. So it's not so much of a spike. It's like a slow release of the glucose. So it's more of a stable source of energy than the simple carbohydrates. And that's in the categories of vegetables, beans, whole grains, quinoa, which is not a grain, although you'll find it in the grains section. It's a pseudo grain, highly beneficial food. Nuts and seeds, these are all complex carbs. So when you're eating simple carbs, there's a high spike from that dotted line. That dotted line is kind of the baseline of where we want our blood sugar to be. There's a high spike with simple sugars really quickly, and therefore there's a big crash, big dip afterwards, okay? That spike and crash is very stressful on our body. It causes stress hormones, actually, which for a midlife metabolism is not good for us. Those stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline interact with our thyroid. It interacts with so many different things. So we want to, as much as possible, keep our blood sugar as modulated as we can. And the complex carbohydrates just don't spike as quickly. Therefore, they don't create as much of a dip as quickly. So they're just overall better quality carbohydrates to be able to consume when you are consuming your 50 to 100 carbohydrates, if that's the zone that you're looking for, okay? So in review, in this lesson, you learned how carbohydrates influence fat storage, how many carbohydrates are right for you, what are the best carbohydrates to eat, when are the best times to eat them, the benefits of a shortened eating window, and regular movement. So upcoming and future lessons, we're going to be covering the importance of protein for midlife metabolism, healthy fats, why to include them in your midlife metabolism reset, creating a simple grab and go balanced meal so that you can just be like, I've got to create something on the go. I want to feel satisfied. I want it to be tasty, and I've got 5 minutes to do it. So I want to help you be able to learn how to do that. And also really emphasizing how to eat intuitively versus tracking, although I will also show you how to track if that really feels like it's in alignment with who you are and feels really good for you to be able to do that. So I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this. As always, I just want to let you know that there are different ways to be able to interact with me. I do have the Midlife Designed Facebook group, which is my free Facebook group, where I host a monthly masterclass series for individuals who are looking to just jumpstart their awareness of how to be able to think about their midlife metabolism. I also host a 10-day seasonal whole food cleanse. I have this Midlife Metabolism Reset membership group and paid program that you are taking advantage of, and also have one-on-one group coaching as well. So I hope you have a fantastic day. Enjoy doing your audit, and I will also have some support materials for this as well in the section as well. I'll talk to you soon.